This is the Change Physician, episode 129.
Hey, folks, welcome back to the Change Physician podcast. This is Dr. Kevin Cuccaro with my Amazeballs co-host, Dr. Amazeballs, Melissa Cady. Dr. Cady, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm ready for this one because I was surprised that you came up with this topic, and I'm really glad you did because I think it's a great one.
All right, so we all know when we're talking about the Change Physician, and particularly season 2, which we're in currently, we're looking at these different aspects of personal development, health, right? What can you do to stay healthy? And we haven't done that as much. Wealth, which we focus on quite a bit, financial decision makings, relationships, which is going to come back to, and then all of these in integrative and really improving yourself, right? So relationships we've talked a couple times about, but for me, well, all this stuff is interesting to me, but relationships are really, really important to me. And I think I individually may have put a lot of interest in this because of my background. So for those of you who don't know, which would probably be almost everybody, I'm a child of divorce, like so many of us are. My parents got divorced in the 80s. I remember thinking it was actually a good thing, not because of anything horrible, but let's just say I was not. It wasn't like I was traumatized by this whole situation. And I also want to put it out there, I wasn't traumatized prior to it either. It didn't seem like it wasn't one of those things. I was never one of those kids, oh, I wish my parents would stay together. No, I never thought that. That being said, I remember at a very early age being very conscious about relationships. And what I mean by that is, what were my friends, and this probably had to do with the area I grew up with, is most of my friends' parents were still married. And so when you were the one with who is not, I started looking at their relationships and their family. And what was it in my friends' families that was healthy about the relationships, as well as in some scenarios what was destructive, but I was really focusing on kind of the healthy things. And so as I've kind of evolved and grown, I've been very interested in this. Like I have a lot of relationship books in my house, like lots of them. And so John Gottman, who we have talked about when we talk about the 4 horsemen when it comes to relationships, I've been subscribed to their email list for a number of years. In fact, I was looking it up, and I can say at least the last 3 years because I've saved a bunch of these emails with these little snippets of kind of advice around relationships. The thing I like about John Gottman, for those of you who have not listened to that old episode, is he is a marriage and family therapist out of Seattle. He's got the Gottman Institute. He's published a lot. And so he's not just talking out of his butt like a lot of people do. He's got the data to back it up. He's got the lab. They've had longitudinal data for literally decades talking about healthy relationships. And so the last email that I recently got was on Ask for What You Want. And there's these little rules they'll send in these things. And we kind of give these little marriage hits. But this one really rang out to me because the rule of this email was, you are not allowed to complain about not getting something that you never asked for. The idea being with this, and in particularly with our intimate relationships, oftentimes we expect those we're with to be able to read our minds, to feel as exactly as we do. And then when they don't follow our internal thoughts, our internal desires, then we get upset and frustrated. Why didn't you, I'm just angry. Why are you angry at me? Oh, yeah, you should know, that kind of thing. Or expecting, kind of doing this weird little stuff in the background, like maybe hinting, but you're never actually saying what it is that you want. And when they don't actually follow through or act that way, or give you what you want, or choose the restaurant that you want to go to for dinner, then we get upset. And I think it's just so crucial to remember that people are not mind readers. No matter how long that you've been married to somebody, no matter how that relationship has been, no matter how wonderful you think your partner is, or how wonderful you think that your partner views you, we as a society are not mind readers, and we're imperfect in our communication. And so if you have not asked them specifically for what it is that you want, or for what the corrective action would be, maybe there's a behavior that upsets you, maybe they leave, I'm looking around, see people listening, if they're leaving dirty dishes in the house all the time, which, kind of drives me crazy. If you haven't asked them about that, then you don't have the room to actually then correct or then criticize in a constructive way. So
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
Oh boy, I think it becomes even more critical that you discuss your maybe expectations or the things that you need or the things that you don't like. Because when you're two people that come from totally different backgrounds, different families, different maybe certain behaviors that have been mirrored, you are who you are based on kind of what you were growing up around, or certain roles, traditional roles, cultural roles. You have to kind of find um, that place where both of you have your needs met, and um, maybe one person doesn't expect certain things because that's not the way they grew up. So I think it becomes more critical to communicate those things because of how different not only as we are as people, but how how our background has influenced us. So I think you are two people that come with different expectations many times. And so that I think is important. And I don't think, obviously it's not just intimate relationships. I mean, there's all of these things very much apply to, a physician in the medical system, a physician in a certain office, whether it's have an employee or you are an employee yourself and have expectations for safety of your patients or whatever it might be. I think you have to recognize the value of who you are and be okay with expressing things versus clamping down and being quiet, if you're going to live in alignment with your values and who you are, because ultimately that silence or the bitterness or resentment that can build within you is only destructive over a long period of time. So no,
that's an excellent point. I think that we should hammer in on here, because just like all the stuff that we're kind of zooming in, and maybe this is specific, I brought up the specific example of intimate relationships. When things are cold, like there's a core kind of truth about them, you can zoom out and start seeing where the application is relevant to other things. So maybe someone's listening and maybe they're a newer physician, or maybe they're not married and they're like, well, this has nothing relevant to me. No, absolutely it does. Because just as Lisa, Melissa, and how often does this happen in modern practice, where people are frustrated with their MA or their nurse or maybe their administration, and then they're bitching and moaning and griping, but they've never talked to the MA or the nurse administration about what it is that they would rather like to see.
Yeah.
And
they commiserate with everyone else
and commiserate with everybody else. And granted, I'm afraid of power dynamics, but until you have actually voiced, and you can do it in a way where you're not screaming at somebody and say, hey, I would like to see, I noticed that you brought the patient in and you didn't do the vitals, or maybe when you did this, you missed this vital sign. And I really want to see that on every patient who's like this. I want to see the blood pressure, or every patient like this. I want to know, whatever it is, you need to screen your PHQ-9 or whatever. If you've never provided that opportunity for learning, then when you don't see the behavior that you want, you have no room to criticize. Right. And in a professional environment, just like a personal or intimate one, it can surface really well, because if it keeps happening over and over again and it drives you crazy over and over again, now you're more likely to blow up it in the future. And now you've created an environment where not only is it harmful to you, but it's harmful to whoever you work with, who knows what, long stream, maybe you even get labeled as a disruptive physician, whatever that means.
Toxic.
Or toxic, and it's communication is so crucial to relationships between people, no matter where that level is, that spending a little bit of time to recognize that importance. And in specifically for this conversation is to recognize that again, people are not mind readers. Your clinic manager can't read your mind.
Yep.
And that could be a good thing. Sometimes you wouldn't want them to read your mind, but then just recognizing is you can't criticize those things for things that you have not asked for.
Right. And when it comes to this this is where I'm challenged in some ways about, timing, as my dear husband is so much better at timing and delivery, but timing it with the right delivery is really critical as well. I know off air, we talked about even just this acknowledgement that, you want to praise people in public. And if there's some criticisms based on some things you need to be done at work or whatever, maybe do that behind closed doors. But sometimes, in the middle of a moment, like there's a teaching moment and you want the rest of the people in the room, like in the operating room, to hear and learn from what you're teaching the other person, it is kind of, it's can be touchy because like you don't want to make them defensive or be embarrassed, but you want to be very clear this is, you know, safety issue or something you expect to happen. So, you know, if it's an intimate relationship, obviously, you know, you've got to read the situation and know when's a better time, you know, to bring it up. Maybe not right when they roll out of bed. But, you know, there's just, I think that's when you want to ask for what you want, you need to recognize who you're talking to, pick the best timing and the right delivery with the, and I'm not the expert. I'm not the best at that. So I'm probably not the best person to talk to. In some situations I can be, but sometimes it's easier in professional situations to do, but sometimes in your intimate relationships, it can be more challenging.
No,
So,
I would agree. So it's like, make sure you ask for what you want, but make sure that the when you ask for what you want is a good time.
yes, yes. It's
Yeah, no, that
so
makes
true.
a lot of sense. And the other part about with corrective action, so asking for what you want, and you kind of brought into this when you're in an environment or dynamic is how, if you're thinking about perspective of the other individual as well, how can I make this so it is safe for them? Right now, if you're in an emergency situation, doesn't matter. Like if life or death, you're in the OR, someone's crashing, you're going to say something, and it's
Right,
appropriate because of what's occurring.
right.
And then I'm always looking at this stuff as we so much want to view things in black and white all the time,
Mhm.
but really it's much more of a spectrum. And
Yep.
so recognizing that, so the when is almost as important as the what. Like, what are you asking, when you are asking, and then the how, like how are you asking, which is the tonality that you said becomes really, really crucial as well.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. So I guess, you know, when you think about why is this important, I think it's quite clear. I think there's a mental health component to this, not just for you as an individual, but even the health of a relationship. And, you know, if, you know, we just talked about in the last episode about the blue zones and connection and supportive environments in your tribe. And so I think it segues nicely because connection is such an important part, but you have to have healthy interaction and be able to speak your mind, but, you know, ask for what you want. And I just think having the open communication is a critical component in any realm of your life. And so in the change physician, I think if you're going to have healthy relationships, yeah, it might be good to sign up for the Gottman Institute little newsletter, which I just did. But you know, we need reminders because changing maybe some of our patterns of our past that may not be really helpful, could be even toxic. That's really a critical part of becoming a change physician that is more well and finds more joy and happiness and shares that with them, or, you know, with the people around them too.
Now, it comes with this idea about thinking about what you control. And I think we did an episode last year on circles of the circles of control.
Yes.
And so much of us kind of float through life, you know, and this is reflective in this idea of asking for what you want, is we just assume people should know, but they don't. And so what is in, rather than wishing and hoping that those relationships, that other person should change just because I want them to, isn't going to work. Most importantly, you have absolutely no control over what that other person's going to do.
Right.
The only thing that you have control over, whether again it's an intimate relationship or it's your office work, is your communication and what you're choosing to communicate and how you're choosing to communicate with that individual. So rather than be frustrated, focus on those things that are inside that circle of control for you, that then you can directly influence. And then if they choose to respond in a way that is not perfect, and maybe it, you know, the environment is still not good, but at least you created, you know, now you know for sure, right? Because you've specifically stated what you want, and then they responded, rather than doing the say, oh, I just wish they
Mhm.
should just change, they should just do this.
If they love me, they'd know.
If they love me, like, and you know, this is the one thing, is like, none of us are perfect in this stuff, right? But we can learn. And one of the reasons that this resonated with me is because of frustrations that I had in my own relationship, like specifically my marriage.
Yeah.
And my wife and I've been married for 20 years. And they just should know this stuff. Well, They don't. And we think very, very differently. That's the other key thing. The other thing to remember with this is we tend to pick people for their flaws as much as their virtues. So
Mhm.
keeping that in mind is one of the reasons that you may have been attracted to somebody.
Yes.
Maybe the same thing that's driving you crazy in the future.
Yep.
So anyway, I used to drive myself crazy with this stuff. Oh, they should just know, and you're doing all this stuff in the background or whatever, rather than asking,
Yeah.
this is what I want. And then the other one, which I'm just going to leave because this is not part of this episode. It has to do with, and maybe we should do an episode on this one, was the idea of being the change that you wish to see. So we
Yeah.
talk about that in the environmental world, but in your relationships as well, work, intimate or whatever, that's the same thing. Do the behaviors that you would like to see in others to promote the environment that you want to be in. Again, that's within your circle rather than kind of enforcing something else on the side. But I'll leave that for another episode.
No, it's so true. And just like you were influenced by your upbringing, you could be influenced by your partner and seeing what they do, and they might be inspired or just get a clue. And sometimes when you ask for things, you might have to remind them in a different setting or a different situation, because their habits might be hard to break too, not just yours. So we are all human, and it can be challenging. But if you don't have anything else, I will take us out.
Take us out, Captain.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us in the episode of Ask for What You Want. And I think this is a good reminder that no one can read your mind, and that this is a powerful way to, first of all, be aware. What is it you really need or want? Because sometimes we may not realize what we want. We're just kind of expecting some kind of feeling from someone else's actions. And I think it makes you more aware of your needs. And so communicate not just what you want, but maybe at the best timing and the right way for whoever you're speaking with, whether at work or in your personal life. And if you haven't heard of The Change Physician, you can go to thechangephysician.com, join there. If you're a physician or a physician ally, we'd love to have you as part of the community. Make sure to check out all the podcast venues. We love any comments or follows on our Instagram page, The Change Physician, or also the Facebook page. And of course, on YouTube, you can see these videos with our animations along with our voice. But we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care.
Stay well, folks.